Hi, so this is my summary and mind map of 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. The first chapter in the book is stand up straight with your shoulders back. So Jordan goes quite a bit into how lobsters work, and then another example is wrens, and then most animals have a pecking order. So lobsters go through 4 levels to determine which lobster is dominant. And if the lobster loses in level 4, its whole brain is reformed and it won't fight again. So the dominance hierarchy is a part of nature. And if you have low serotonin, you've got decreased confidence, low happiness, and more pain and anxiety. So people can malfunction in their lives. Routines are very important, and stable and reliable habits. So Jordan always asks his new patients about their sleeping habits and fixes those first. Next is a protein and fat-rich breakfast. In terms of being bullied, this often happens to people who are by temperament compassionate and self-sacrificing. But anger and aggression are sometimes required to defend yourself, i.e. push back against oppression or to speak the truth. So someone who walks around with slumped shoulders or shoulders forward, head down, looking small, defeated, and ineffectual, then they'll feel this way. If you start to straighten up, people will look at you differently. Speak your mind, put your desires forward, walk tall, dare to be dangerous. So yeah, this chapter is all about standing up straight and tall and looking people in the eye and being brave and standing up for yourself. Second chapter here is treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. The first example here that Jordan talks about is a kidney transplant patient. So with kidney transplant patients, they have to wait a long time to be able to get their kidney transplant. So the point here, and they have to go through dialysis. It's an expensive procedure, and yet when it comes to it, they don't take the proper drugs when they're meant to take them. So if it's this important, to take drugs, and yet people don't take them when they should, this kind of highlights the importance of this particular point that Jordan's making. So people, and then he notes here, people look after their pets better than themselves. So Jordan kind of goes through the Adam and Eve story in the Bible, and he talks about order and chaos quite a bit. And then he comes to the conclusion right at the end is, why would someone naked, ugly, ashamed, worthless, cowardly, resentful, and defensive look after themselves? So Jordan feels the main reason why people don't look after themselves is because they might feel this way about themselves. And in terms of this walk with God, so we need to respect ourselves despite our propensity for evil. We deserve some respect. We're important to other people. We have a moral obligation to look after ourselves. You have to articulate your own principles so people don't take advantage of you. Discipline yourself, keep your promises to yourself, and reward yourself. Next chapter here is about make friends with people who want the best for you. And then Jordan goes into detail about his early childhood in Alberta, and one of the friends he had, Chris, who was intelligent and had lots of potential, but basically ended up being a stoner and committing suicide. So Jordan's question here that you need to ask is, why did Chris continually choose people in places that weren't good for him? In terms of rescuing the damned, Jordan makes the point here that what happens when you introduce a poor performer to a team of good performers, and then the research shows that the whole team starts degrading. Same thing when you place a delinquent teen with civilized peers. And in terms of a reciprocal arrangement, why would you hang out with someone you wouldn't recommend to your family? You're not morally obligated to support someone who's not making the world a better place, even if you call it loyalty. Next chapter here, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. So Jordan talks about a critical internal voice. There's always someone better than us. If your internal, and then his advice is, if your internal voice makes you doubt the value of endeavors, maybe you should stop listening to it. There's no better or worse. Nothing would be worth doing. So there's always going to be people that are better or worse than you. That's just life. And there are many games to play, and you can always try a new one. So play as many games as you can to figure out what you're best at. And then he suggests here you consult your resentment. So speak up. Saying nothing is a lie. What do you do to avoid conflict? And then this end of the day concept. By the end of the day, I want things in my life to be a tiny bit better than they were this morning. And give yourself a reward if you succeed. What you aim at determines what you see. What you focus on, you see. So this is a very interesting experiment where what happened was they told the people to watch this basketball game and count how many passes they were within the game. And then midway through the game, this gorilla walks through the basketball court. So and then more than half the people who do this experiment don't actually notice the gorilla. So then Jordan's point here is maybe you're focusing on the wrong thing. You're too tightly focused on the passes and you're missing the gorilla. So let go of your tight, narrow focus. Start aiming at something different. Like, I want my life to be better. And then this last point is pay attention. Pay attention to what you could fix. What is it that is bothering me? Is that something I could fix? Would I actually be willing to fix it? The answer is no, aim lower. The next chapter here is about your children. So do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. And then chapter about this divine child. So Jordan just says straightforwardly here that we have this ideal that children are naive and innocent, but that's rarely not the case. In his view, people generally improve with age. They become kinder and more conscientious. And then schoolyard bullying rarely translates into adulthood bullying. And then even dogs have to be socialized, and children are much more complex. So he feels children need to be trained, disciplined, and properly encouraged. So parent or friend, modern parents believe their children won't like them if they correct them. And then this is a very important point. Parents are the arbiters of society. It is an act of responsibility to discipline a child. Scared parents think that a crying child is always sad or hurt. This is not always true. Anger is a common reason. So discipline and punishment, positive rewards can work. For example, if your daughter doesn't talk much, then giving her your full undivided attention when she does start talking is an important positive reward that you can do in that scenario. Both positive and negative emotions are important. So negative helps us avoid pain, and then this is an important point that if you're not correcting, then a 3-year-old doesn't share. And if children under the age, and then this is if the child has not been taught that properly by age 4, it will be difficult for them to make friends. So this is what the research says. So if you don't teach your child to share, and you don't punish them if they don't do the right thing in that kind of scenario, the end result might be that they have no friends. So in terms of disciplining your children, Jordan talks about a minimum necessary force. So how should children be disciplined? One, the first thing is limit the rules. The second, use the least force necessary to enforce them. So some of the rules that Jordan feels are important for children: do not bite, hit, or kick unless in self-defense. Eat nicely, share, listen to your parents, sleep properly, take care of your belongings, be good company. So the least force could be just a glare. Some children, if you give them a glare, they'll stop doing whatever it is. But some children might eat a flick or even a snack to stop them from doing what they shouldn't be doing. So physical punishment may be necessary, and timeouts can work, and then the child can return when they calm down. But I think the point here is, one type of punishment is not going to work for every single child. So you have to tailor your punishment for the child. And then this last point here on principles. So limit the rules, use minimum necessary force. Parents should come in pairs. Parents should understand their own capacity for evil. So, if they let their child get away with something, punishment of that child will occur later, or will occur at some point in some manner. And then parents have a duty to act as proxies for the real world. Next chapter here, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. And then curse the mass murderers, their hatred of the world and view that existence is meaningless. Why must innocent people suffer so horribly? What kind of bloody horrible planet is it? Life is in truth very hard with lots of pain and suffering. Even the great Tolstoy rationalized this way. So vengeance and transformation. Nihilism is the radical rejection of value, meaning, and desirability. But terrible past can be overcome. So I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Solzhenitsyn, he was in prison in World War II, and he got cancer while he was in prison. And what he did is he poured over the details of his life and asked himself where he had failed. And what came out of that was the Gulag archipelago. And basically, this book, Jordan feels, led to the downfall of communism, because no one that read this book could rationalize that communism was good. So clean up your life. Have you taken full advantage of the opportunities offered to you? Are you working hard in your career? Have you made peace with your brother? Are you treating your spouse and children with dignity and respect? Are you truly shouldering your responsibilities? Have you said what needs to be said? Are there things you could do to make your life better? No. Next chapter here is on pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. So, you could pursue pleasure. If life is suffering and we're doomed to die, should we just pursue pleasure? Should we just do what we want and have fun and enjoy ourselves? So delayed gratification, which Jordan speaks a lot about sacrifice and how this comes through in the religious texts. So work is basically a sacrifice now to gain later. And the principle of sacrifice is that will improve your future. So, an obvious example here is someone going to medical school. They spend 10 years or so studying, and then once they become a doctor, they reap the rewards for all of that sacrifice. So what is the biggest sacrifice you can make now to improve your future? Benjamin Franklin, what he did was he always asked someone for something small, as he found this was the most useful and immediate invitation for social interaction. So the difference between successful and unsuccessful people is successful people sacrifice. And then Jordan says Jesus Christ is the greatest sacrifice there is, as he sacrifices himself. And then another example he gives is Socrates, who refused to ignore his conscience or inner voice, and ultimately he didn't fear death. He could have avoided death, he could have escaped, but he confronted death because he couldn't ignore his conscience. So evil must sacrifice to delay gratification and stop evil. No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach to hell. That was Carl Jung. And then Jordan talks about Jesus spending 40 days in the desert and he's tempted by the devil. So what do you do when you faced with temptation? And the temptation basically to do evil. Doubt. What cannot be doubted? So the only thing that's really true is the reality of suffering. So we all ultimately get old and die, and that's the reality of living. So and then Jordan feels the worst sin that there is the torment of others. And so what is good is the opposite of that. So what is good is whatever stops such things from happening. And then moral conclusions: aim up, pay attention, fix what you can fix. Don't be arrogant in your knowledge. Strive for humility. Become aware of your own insufficiency, cowardice, malevolence, resentment, and hatred. Don't lie. I'll act in a manner that leads to the alleviation of unnecessary pain and suffering. Next chapter here is about telling the truth, or at least don't lie. So Jordan noticed in his own life, and he kind of divided himself into two parts: one that spoke and the other that paid attention and judged. And he realized he was fake, and so he then started only saying things that his internal voice wouldn't object to. He gives this example of this ex-biker who's a really kind of dangerous kind of guy who quit. He did quit drinking, but he kept having binges, so he would kind of go on this drinking binge, and then he'd come across to Jordan's house and try sell like a toaster or whatever. And this was usually late at night, so it was scary for Jordan's wife, and eventually he had to kind of, he could have just carried on buying these possessions, or eventually he had to kind of tell this biker the truth, and he had to do it in a kind of very sincere and direct way. And the biker didn't bother him again, so that would have been quite a scary thing to tell the truth in that situation, but it worked for Jordan. Life's lies. So some people tell themselves government is bad, immigration is bad, capitalism is bad, and then they live life through this lens, so they only see things that prove that these ideas that they have are correct. Another example he gives is people who say, I want to retire at the age of 50 when they're 18. And then he says, if you say no to your spouse, or mother when it needs to be said, then you transform yourself. If you say yes when you should say no, you risk never being able to say no. At its worst, lies leads to a corrupt state like Russian communism or totalitarian. Everything that needs to be discovered has been. What saves is the willingness to learn from what you don't know. So tell the truth instead. How do you tell the truth? Pay attention, open your eyes. Example, a friend whose wife was having an affair, and he didn't know, and he was pretty depressed once he found out, but he emerged from that. So set your ambitions to develop character and ability rather than have status and power. You're doing engineering at uni because that's what your parents wanted you to do. So he gives an example of someone who goes to uni, starts engineering, and then fails after the first or second year because that's not really what they wanted to do. So they should have told their parents the truth instead. The next chapter here is assume that the person you're listening to might know something you don't. And So not advice. So true listening is not giving advice. It's a genuine conversation that results in exploration, articulation, and strategizing. Listening is paying attention. So figure it out yourself. So a lot of this chapter Jordan talks about is almost related to his psychology business and talking to clients. So he says that people need to talk to think. They can think about what stupid things not to do. True thinking is listening to yourself, which is difficult and not many people can do it. So what you have to do then is talk to someone else. And basically when you're talking to them, you're seeing how they react to what you're saying. So a listening person can reflect the crowd and can do that without talking. So, he gives an example. You have someone says, "I hate my wife," and then obviously, someone that says that to you, kind of get a reaction, and then he carries on and goes, "Oh well, no, I don't necessarily hate her. I don't like it when she does X," and then this person basically then figures out, what's happening in their relationship by talking through this thing that they first stated here. And then they finally come to the realization that, the real problem is X, not that they hate their wife. It's because their mother did something in their life or whatever. So they figure out some of their problems through talking. So how should you listen? The great majority of us cannot listen. We find ourselves compelled to evaluate an argument. Each person can. So the suggestion here is, if you're having an argument with someone, you can only speak up for yourself once you've first restated the ideas and feelings of the previous speaker. So not listening. Someone tells a story and then another tries to tell a better story. So that's just jockeying for position, using the time to think what they will say next. One person is trying to attain victory for his point of view. So dual conversation is when there's mutual exploration, requires true reciprocity from those listening and speaking. The next chapter is about being precise. So be precise with your speech. Jordan talks quite a lot about it being a very complex world. So the world is complex, and the things we take for granted are complex. We only notice when something goes wrong, like our car breaks down. So we drive around thinking that there's nothing wrong, then our car breaks down, and then we realize that we actually don't know anything about our car and how to fix it. If you're not a mechanic. So Jordan talks about here a husband having an affair. And the wife not knowing about it, and then once she finds out, it's the same thing. Yeah, life's going fine. You think everything's fine until something goes wrong. And he gives another example here of a dragon growing. So there's a story about how a dragon keeps growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it's this massive sized dragon. Basically, what he's saying there is you're basically ignoring something that's hurting your relationship, and at the start it starts small, and then it just continues to grow bigger and bigger until it's this big problem. So he talks about keeping the peace. Basically, what keeping the peace ends up doing is letting resentment, loneliness, hatred, boredom, and jealousy grow. So when things fall apart, when chaos reemerges, we can give structure to it and reestablish order through our speech. If we can speak carefully and precisely, we can sort things out, put them in their proper place, and set a new goal and navigate towards it. So being precise, often couples fail to communicate because every argument becomes about everything. This is the exact precise thing that's making. Instead, we should be saying, "This is the exact precise thing that's making me unhappy. What is wrong exactly? What do I want exactly?" So what do you mean? So you can say what you mean, so you can find out what you mean. Act out what you say. Pay attention, note your errors, strive to correct them. That is how you discover the meaning of your life and protect yourself from tragedy. Confront the chaos of being. Take aim against the sea of trouble. Specify your destination and chart your course. Admit what you want. Tell those around you. Be precise with your speech. So this one's about don't bother children when they're skateboarding. So Jordan talks about danger and mastery. People optimize risks so that they continue to develop. And he talks a lot about boys in the modern world, and he says boys are suffering in the modern world. They're more disobedient, less agreeable, less susceptible to anxiety and depression. This is in general. So boys' interests tilt towards things, and boys like competition, and they don't like to obey. And then Jordan talks about girls can win by winning in their own and in boys' hierarchy. So, but boys can only win in the male hierarchy. So, example here is getting into a fight with a girl. So, if a boy gets into a fight with a girl, either he wins, and then everyone criticizes him because he's obviously not obviously, but boys tend to be stronger than girls. So, hey, what are you doing fighting with a girl? But then if the girl wins, then he looks like a weakling to all his friends. So boys can only really win in their own hierarchies. And then Jordan points out that the rate of males in certain degrees in uni is decreasing rapidly. And then his conclusion is that it's not good for men or for women. And then he talks about how we assume aggression is a learned response, and then boys should be socialized like girls. They should have tenderness, sensitivity, and cooperation. But aggression underlies the drive to be outstanding, to be unstoppable, to compete, and to win. And so Jordan's view is that aggressive children need to be socialized before the age of 4. They need to use their aggressive tendencies in a sophisticated manner. So rather than trying to teach an aggressive boy to be tender and kind and sensitive, we want to teach them to use their aggression in a more sophisticated manner. So a lot of the issues Jordan has with women in his consulting practice is that they actually don't have enough aggression. So they're martyrs, they're agreeable, they avoid conflict, they sacrifice, and they don't speak up. And all of that leads to resentment. The best thing you can do is to help your children to become independent. Then he gives an example here of when he was kind of at the age where starting to like girls, and he was actually getting into a fight, or it looked like he might fight with another boy, and his mum walked by and saw what was happening, but just ignored it and just carried on walking past. So that was a good thing that his mum did in that case. And then he gives an example here of working on the railroad. So he gives this example of this one guy who the guys on the roads called Lunch Bucket, and this guy was grumpy and didn't get along with anyone, and eventually he basically had to just quit because because he didn't get on with the other guys working on this railroad. So Jordan says here, men force a code of behavior when working together. Do your work, pull your weight, stay awake and pay attention. Don't whine or be touchy. Stand up for your friends. Don't suck and be a snitch. Don't be a slave to stupid rules. And then the harassment that like this guy was actually pretty much harassed when when he started on railroads. And so Jordan's saying the harassment that is part of a working crew is a test. Are you tough, entertaining, competent, and reliable? And then Jordan points out here, if you think tough men are dangerous, wait until you see what weak men are capable of. The final chapter here is about pet a cat when you encounter one in the street. This is just an interesting study. So when you divide people into groups, they showed favoritism to the group members. No matter how you divided them up, once they were in a group, they showed favoritism to the group that they were in. And then Jordan kind of points out, yeah, people are social to group members and antisocial to non-group members. So Michaela's Jordan's daughter, and he talks through how she got juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. And just reading about her struggles, it's really sad what she's had to go through. Obviously, a really tough life. So Jordan talks about the fragility of life, the catastrophe of existence, and the sense of nihilism evoked by the spectre of death. So he basically talks about how he tells a story about how if there's an omnipotent, omnipresent God with no limitation, there's really no story to that. So for this reason, God created man. So then he kind of gives an analogy of Superman and how the comic book writers who wrote about Superman, he sort of became indestructible, and at that point he started to become boring. So the writers had to do stuff like create kryptonite, which could hurt Superman to make it more interesting. Being or to become is to become something more. That can only happen if you're limited. Hating life and despising life only serves to make life worse. In terms of thinking fails in intolerable times. Instead, noticing helps. So start with noticing that when you love someone, it's not despite the limitations, it's because of their limitations. In terms of, he talks a lot about Michaela, and her situation is kind of unbearable to read. She has to go through so much pain and suffering. So Jordan gives some advice about what to do if this is happening in your life. So set some time to talk and think about the crisis that you're going through every day. If you don't do that, it consumes you, and you think about it all the time. And then don't do this at night, you won't sleep. And then you need to make a conscious decision to assume the primary goodness of being. So people can survive through much pain and loss, but for perseverance, they must see the good in being. So, and then in terms of cats, when you encounter a cat and pet it for 15 seconds, you'll get a reminder of the wonder of being, and it might make up for the radical suffering that accompanies it. So thanks. That's my summary and mind map of 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson.